Oh, hello. Today we are going to be doing my quarterly wrap up a little later into the second quarter than I normally would. I want to do a slightly different format today, so we're going to focus more on some of the stats than I normally do in my quarterly reviews. Normally I'm more focused on kind of like, hey, here are the top books from this last 3 months. And today I want to talk kind of equally about my overall reading and the top books that I read in January, February, March. I had a stellar first quarter reading of 2022, the best reading I've had in a couple of years, consistently picking up things that I was liking and enjoying. Some of that I think are the kind of books that I had up on the docket to read from a, books that I had committed to read early standpoint, or things that I, wanted to read based on, new releases from series, etc. But I also think some of that is that I've been really leaning into mood reading for the last few months. I've kind of restructured some of my content to allow that to happen. And I think that that is definitely paying dividends because I am getting to read and enjoy things kind of when I'm in the mood to, as opposed to having so much structure around my reading. I'm allowing myself to sort of like, hey, I'm in the mood for this project. I'm going to just start doing that project. And I think that that has been a really successful strategy for me. So with that being said, let's start with some stats, and then we will talk about the best books I read in the first quarter of 2022. Okay, so in those 3 months, I read 86 books, which is nearly a book a day. That checks out because I've been very much in the mood to read for the last little bit. And I read a total of 28,304 pages with an average book length of 329 pages. The average age of books I read was 4 years, and the amount of time on average a book had been on my TBR was 1 year. I paid for 45.35% of the books that I read, and the average amount that I paid for those books is $5.49. In those 3 months, I added 48 books to my TBR, and I removed 56 books from my TBR, either through reading or unhauling, which means that my quarterly change to my TBR was -8 books, and so far in the year, the overall change is -8 books. So I am reading more from my TBR than I'm adding to it, which I'm gonna say is a rarity, so good job me. In terms of where books came from, the biggest category, as per usual, was Amazon. I am a Kindle reader, so that makes sense. And then the next biggest group was publishers. Again, I always prioritize my advanced reader copies, so that makes sense. Getting into the demographics of my reading, so I still continue to read mostly books from women, but I had more men or neither in the mix this time, so, slightly better. I'm not mad that I'm reading mostly from women. It just cracks me up compared to where I was a few years ago when I was reading a lot more Christian stuff. I read overwhelmingly from men, so now there's been a real switcheroo in the demographics there. And then about 55% of the books that I read had some notable element that was not like me. So either the author or the main character was a different religion or race or sexuality or whatever. So that is a continuation from the trend from last year. And again, really, I think is proving to me that if you kind of like take a long-term view and set a goal long-term, you definitely can kind of build a TBR over time that is a lot more diverse. One area that I am not very diverse in these days is when books I am reading were published. I do read way more skewed towards the front list than I would like. So you can see that some of that is because I am prioritizing books that I'm getting in advance, but also just in general, I wish that I was reading a little more backlist. So less diversity there than I would like, but this is the mix. And then I've been getting better about reading some audio. I think because I had a couple of projects or buddy reads that were nonfiction, I've been kind of forced to get a little bit more into audio again because I do really enjoy nonfiction on audio. So about 15% of what I read at least in part on audio. So getting that listening kind of back into the groove has been nice. And then about 15% of what I read was either YA or middle grade as opposed to adult, which again, a little higher, but pretty typical for me. And then the two big kahunas, genre and rating. So genre-wise, I have been very much in the mood for mystery recently. I think if I had no projects going on or no other commitments, I, for the last few months, would have been only reading mysteries and sci-fi romance. Like that has been what I've been in the mood to do, but you know, I try to mix it up. I still, however, definitely my biggest category of genre was mystery. Followed by, I think this kind of surprised me a little bit, followed by nonfiction in its various forms, and then by fantasy. So I don't have any romance in that top slot. I guess if I combined contemporary, speculative, and historical romance all together, that would have been my second most read genre. But I've not been reading as much romance as I typically do. And I don't know, I think I've been very much in a sci-fi romance mood. I've been struggling sometimes to get in the mood to read other kinds. So anyway, just that kind of surprised me a little bit. But overall, I'm glad to see that, as per usual, I have a pretty good blend of all the different genres and types of books that I read. And then, as we can see, borne out in the data, a very, very strong reading quarter based on rating. So my average rating was 3.48 stars, and the distribution is pretty impressive. I had 11 4.5 star books. I didn't have any 5 stars, but for me, a 5 star I define as an all-time favorite. So to have 11 4.5, which for me is a favorite of the year, I feel like is really fantastic and has to be one of the best reading quarters I've had in a while. Overall, you can see that the bell curve topping out is at 3.5, and for me that's a B+. So like on average, basically the books that I'm reading the most of are at least a B+, so that is great. Had a couple of DNFs and a few things that I didn't like as much, which we will definitely talk about when we get to my end of the year lists. But for now, let's focus on the positive and just say that overall, yes, like an incredibly strong reading quarter by the numbers and just by my overall feeling of enthusiasm of the things that I'm reading. I'm just like in a good groove and in a good place with all of it. So now let's go over those 11 4.5 stars that I gave out, and I will tell you, I think what my favorite of the quarter was, but we'll start with nonfiction. So I gave Hood Feminism, Notes from the Woman That a Movement Forgot by Mickey Kendall, 4.5 stars. I gave Bad Fat Black Girl by Cecily Bowen, Notes from a Trap Feminist. I gave this 4.5 stars. I should say Hood Feminism is, let's call it like sociological nonfiction. This is a memoir. Another memoir I gave 4.5 stars to is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And then a sociology and science book, I guess, that I gave 4.5 stars to was Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison. Then let's talk about the romance books that I gave 4.5 stars to. I gave Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood 4.5 stars, which is a contemporary, I guess I would call that like a rom-com based in STEM setting. I gave Book Lovers by Emily Henry 4.5 stars. Again, I would call that a rom-com. No, I take that back. I would not call that a rom-com. I would call that a small town romance, enemies to lovers. And then, let's see, Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare is a paranormal romance with witches. And I think those were the 3 romances I gave 4.5 to. Then I had 2 fantasies that I gave 4.5 to. I had Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri, which I would say is a epic fantasy in sort of an Indian, South Asian, let's say, based fantasy world. And then Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is a epic high fantasy in a pre-Columbian South American inspired setting world. So it's 4 nonfiction, 3 romance, 2 fantasy, and then 2 mystery. So I would say Shiver by Allie Reynolds, which is an isolated closed circle mystery. And then I would say my top 4.5 star for the quarter, which kind of surprised me when I was looking back on it. I was like looking at the group of these books and realized like, yeah, I think that this was my favorite, was The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. That doesn't come out till June, I'm sorry, but it is a mystery whodunit. And it is a book within a book. So it's sort of a reverse locker room mystery for the book in the book, where a murder happens. We know it was one of the people who were locked in this room together. How? Who? All that. And then it has a framing device that I think really took it from like good to great for me, was the way the framing device ended up playing out. I very much enjoyed that. So I hope people will pick it up when it comes out. I have one other book from her on my TBR that I'm excited to get to. So yeah, I would say that that was my favorite book of the quarter. And like I said, just a fantastic quarter all around, a lot of really good books, a lot of great reading, and I have a lot of good energy coming into Q2. I would say that April so far is not going as swimmingly as the first quarter did, but we're gonna keep on keeping on. But yeah, let me know what your favorite thing you've read so far this year is, and let me know what you thought of any of the books that I talked about. Also, do you like this kind of format? I enjoyed getting all the stats together, so I enjoyed this, but let me know any feedback you have on format. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!